Hi, I'm Brian Levy. I am the Chief Relationship Officer for Manchester Care Homes and Cambridge Caregivers. I'm also the host of the Manchester Living podcast. The purpose of the podcast is to help people navigate the complex maze of elder care. There is a lexicon of elder care terms on our website at manchesterlivingpodcast.com. Today's episode is titled PSP, which stands for Progressive Supranuclear Palsy. We're going to call it PSP for tongue twister's sake. So if you hear PSP, that's what it stands for. Let's roll today's new and noteworthy, featuring an overview of PSP published by the Mayo Clinic.
Progressive Supranuclear Palsy, or PSP, is a disease you may have never heard of and will probably hope you never have to deal with.
Many of the features are similar to Parkinson's disease, and many people are misdiagnosed early on because of those similarities.
People with PSP have trouble walking and maintaining their balance. They also have a hard time moving their eyes, blinking regularly, or controlling their facial expressions. It can also affect a person's behavior and their ability to think normally.
It's relatively rare. It's about the same prevalence as Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS.
Dr. Bradley Beauvais, a neurologist at Mayo Clinic, says it usually comes on when people are in their 50s or 60s, but it's not clear what causes PSP, and there is no cure. Physical, occupational, and speech therapies can help symptoms, and there are some medicines.
This is a very, frankly, devastating, terrible illness. From onset until passing away usually is in the 2 to 7 year range.
For the Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Ian Roth.
Ongoing scientific research is essential to advancing our understanding and developing effective treatments for neurodegenerative diseases. Thank you, Mayo Clinic, for your service and your work. Thank you both for being here. Janice, what is your connection to PSP, and how did you get here?
My name is Janice Bloom, and my husband has PSP. He was diagnosed with that disease about 6 months after he was initially diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I knew that I needed to make alternative arrangements for his care and his living situation. And so that's when I contacted you.
Got it. And soon thereafter, I realized I need to know more about this. And I contacted Ileen. Who are you and what do you do?
So I am Ileen McFarland. And when my late husband passed in 2012, I was already connected with the Cure PSP Foundation. I began to serve as a volunteer, a support group facilitator, and then eventually on the board of directors. That was like 14 years ago. So I was trying to find, I had moved here, I had remarried, moved to Dallas, and I was trying to connect with different organizations here in Dallas to help our community of patients and caregivers here. And that's when I met you. And I think it was around COVID time.
That's right.
And we talked about the organization and what they do. And then you shared with me about Manchester Homes and Cambridge Caregiving services, and I have referred a couple of people to you over the years. So I thought that that was the first time I even thought about, a home versus a facility.
Right.
So
that's how it all went down.
Welcome
to Manchester Living Podcast. Let's dig in. PSP is often misdiagnosed, as you mentioned, as Parkinson's. Why do you think that is, and how did this impact your understanding of the disease and the way you approach the treatment? Do you want to start, Janice?
Yes, I think that they share symptoms, at least initially. And the symptoms that we gave the doctor, everything pointed to the fact that this was Parkinson's. The problem is that PSP is so much more progressive and aggressive. So when they put him initially on the carbidopa-levodopa, he just was not responding. He did initially, but about 3 to 6 months in, I noticed that we're not seeing much of a difference, and something is going on here. The symptoms were just coming faster, and he started to fall. He went from a cane to a walker to a wheelchair within a matter of about 6 months.
And you know that was not Parkinson's.
And I knew that was not Parkinson's.
Right.
So we went and got a second opinion. The second opinion involved an exam that was much more thorough, and especially looking at just a lot of things with movement, the eyes, etc.
Great.
Very similar experience with my late husband. It was very obvious to me when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's within 6 months that this was not Parkinson's. One of the things I learned is that if you want to get closer to a diagnosis of a rare disease, which is PSP is, you must go to a movement disorder center. The neurologists there they're more knowledgeable about the diseases, the rare diseases. And actually, that's what I did. I took him to Hopkins and Maryland, and it was a movement disorder clinic. And they immediately diagnosed him with PSP, where the other neurologist, who wasn't a movement disorder neurologist, he was, because he's diagnosed in Parkinson's, but that's what his primary focus was. So anyway, they diagnosed him immediately with PSP. I couldn't believe it. So I took him to 3 other movement disorder centers. And finally, we settled on PSP. And after brain donation, it was confirmed.
Walk me through the progression here. Once you received the PSP diagnosis, did your neurologist explain what that is and put together a care plan and introduce you to a social worker, and you started learning at that point? I see you rolling your eyes. So obviously that didn't happen. We know that, right?
I learned everything through the experience itself as it was happening. The neurologist didn't really refer me to curepsp.org, which was the only organization in the United States of America that deals with this, and didn't tell me to talk to a social worker, didn't suggest physical therapy, My husband went to the gym 3 times a week, and I paid a personal trainer who had experience and a degree in kinesiology and worked with Parkinson's patients. That was a miracle because he stayed in that gym until a week before he died. Even when he was in a wheelchair, we went 3 times a week.
Wow.
And so my point being, no, today we're educating neurologists in the movement disorder centers, the centers of care that we have 37 or 38 of, because we recognize the importance of that for not just the patient, but for the caregiver and the family.
Right.
So they know what's coming.
Yeah. Janice?
My situation is very similar to hers. I didn't hear about any support groups, was not referred to a social worker. And basically, I got online and started researching for myself what was coming. Of course, I had lived now for about 6 months of uncertainty. And the thing about this disease as I experienced it is my husband would go along and I was navigating it okay. And then the next morning I might wake up and suddenly something happened during the middle of the night where we went down to the next level. And we have to learn how to navigate that. And it stayed on that level for a certain amount of time. And then again, we go down to the next level. So I knew this was coming on pretty fast and just the uncertainty. We did go to physical therapy over the period of about 3 to 4 months. It did not help. Mm-hmm. There was absolutely no, I could not see any difference between his movements, working the physical therapy, and it seemed to still progress. Mm-hmm. I don't think that physical therapy in his case was necessarily slowing it down. Yeah. So.
And what steps did you take? I know you did some home renovations. What else did you do once the diagnosis was set and you knew what was happening, to get your affairs in order, to get his affairs in order, to modify the house, etc.?
We had gone through a renovation before this diagnosis with the intent of staying in this house until we were gone from this earth. That was the plan. Mm-hmm. Had I known this was coming on, I would have done things like made the door openings wider to better accommodate a wheelchair. As it was a rather tight fit. Now, that said, we still could accommodate a wheelchair quite a bit in the house. The problem is that when you're having to help lift somebody for various things like bathroom duty, that sort of thing, for the caregiver, it's very hard on the back. And eventually my back gave out, and I realized I'm in a situation here that is above and beyond me. All right. As far as the affairs, the financial affairs, in my house, my husband deferred the handling of finances and bills and everything to me. So I really lucked out. I know that that's not the situation in every home. So I have great knowledge of what was going on. But as soon as I knew that we are in a situation where he's not going to be able to remain home because my back cannot handle his weight, I did go to our financial people and make the best arrangements that I could. I knew it was coming.
Plan ahead.
I did.
Do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, a lot of the resources that are available through Cure PSP address this now, recognizing that many caregivers, we've learned from our caregivers over the years at the family conferences what they're dealing with, and then try to provide them with resources. This is the kind of things you should consider. And when we find out about a new resource of medical equipment or whatever, we put it on our resource list on the website. It's so crucial because caregivers don't have time to research things. You have to stay with your loved one 24/7. You can't leave that person's side. And if you do, you're taking the risk that they're going to fall. And over the years, over 14 years of working with people in support groups, and as a peer volunteer, I've seen people die when they fall. They break their neck or they hit their head on something very hard and they end up getting a brain bleed. So caregivers don't have time to do this kind of research.
Sure.
And so we try to, that's what peer volunteers and support groups, they talk about what they're dealing with, and other people share their stories.
You mentioned brain donation.
Yes.
I know that takes sensitivity and compassion. How did you broach that subject? And what is your recommendation for people in similar situations? That's a tough one, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. It's interesting because there were just too many symptoms that were obviously not Parkinson's. This falling every other. I mean, if I wasn't by his side constantly, he would fall. And he was 6'3", weighed 200 and some pounds. So I'm 5'3", and I weighed about 110. Anyway, the point is that he obviously had symptoms that weren't necessarily Parkinson's. I mean, I know they trip, and can fall, but he couldn't get out of a chair without falling on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I will add to that. I did notice that there were certain things about my husband's facial expressions that were changing. He just didn't seem to respond emotionally the way he normally did. And that came on rather quickly as well. And also, I mean, he was a very stoic person. So to watch a movie that might grab the emotions, it was not like him to break down and cry. But I noticed that something was going on with respect to facial movements and as well as the emotions. And that concerned me as well. So it wasn't just the falling. It was these other things that were coming on as well.
Sure. You are so attentive. You know your spouses so well. You know when something's off. You wanted to add?
Yes, I can remember one morning I was getting ready for work, and my husband was about to go into the shower. And this is after his diagnosis, but it was shortly after. And all of a sudden, my husband just had a meltdown. And I ran over to him and I said, "It's going to be okay," but trying to calm him down. And he said, "Please help me. Don't leave me here."
Mm.
And I said, "Do you want me to quit work?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "I quit work." I said, "I need to go into the office and explain to my boss, so I will be back. Don't take a shower. I want you to sit in your chair, watch this golf tournament or whatever."
Yeah.
And the apathy is what it's part of the disease.
Mhm.
They become apathetic. The emotions aren't there. And when that happens, then you get the stone-faced look. It's
Right.
almost like a stone-faced look.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're familiar with it.
I am. And I even personalized it initially, because I thought, is there something wrong with me that he's not responding to me like he normally does?
Right.
That set of usual normal dynamics was beginning to change rather abruptly.
Luckily, in a support group, the very first person in a support group years ago that died of PSP, his wife had arranged for brain donation. Now, remember, this is back in 2012. And so when she received the results, because basically the brain goes to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville and it's used by researchers all over the world. But prior to that, there's an autopsy performed to confirm what that person had. And believe me, today, that is so crucial because we have discovered that a person can have PSP and CBD, MSA or PSP, Alzheimer's and PSP. I could go on and on and on. ALS, and I could go on and on. So what happened is once they brought it up in the support group, my husband said to me, I want to do brain donation because I want to help others. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. He actually testified in front of the FDA, a huge auditorium, because they wanted to know what this disease was. And so he and I were on a stage and he talked about how this affected his life, how it took his life from him, and how this progression has affected him. He said, I am a prisoner in my own body.
Wow, that's impactful.
Mm-hmm.
This question definitely goes to both of you. Can you share the moment that you had to reconcile with your husband's declining independence and ensure his safety, and how you found balance? You want to address that first?
Yeah, I found balance by not selling the house when I should have. That was number one. And he had a 1953 number 44 Corvette, renovated to the max, one Bloomington Gold. I had to sell that. I had to sell the house, and I couldn't do it until he finally realized it was in his final year of life. And I said, we've got to do this financially. We need to sell this house, and we'd have to get the car stored, and we can't afford to pay for it. Those kinds of things, when you don't want to take anything away from a patient that you can possibly control. The other thing on the upbeat was he traveled a lot. He was in the communications and he was all over the country, except for 2 states, Alaska and North Dakota or South Dakota. And he said one day to me, the year before he died, almost a month to the date, I want to go to Alaska. I said, okay. So I called my friend from the support grid. I said, you travel a lot. So what do you suggest? You take a lot of cruises. I've been married to 2 golfers. Golfers don't take cruises, so I've never been on a cruise. Mm-hmm. So they said, get a cabin with a balcony, center of the ship, because you won't feel this. Yeah. I said, okay. So we went on a cruise to Alaska. My whole family thought I was nuts. I had duffel bags full of Depends and pads and all his supplies and medication, and we had a ball. We were on the ship for 3 weeks on the inside passage. And we actually got to go on a train. One of the stops was, there was a train that had an entire car with an elevator. So I could just put the wheelchair on the elevator in the car, and we got to go through the Gold Rush country. Wow. On the train. Nice. So
you're such an advocate.
I'm telling you, it was a bright side. It was a moment in time. You know, it was fantastic. And that's where I found the balance. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and you've probably already dealt with this too, taking the keys away from a man. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do it. His friend in New York, Bob, would you please come down here and take him to lunch and get his keys away, because he just ran into a tree and totaled a car, and he's fine.
Yeah, tough. Janice, you want to share your story?
I think I've been blessed in that regard. My husband just knew it was time to give up the keys, and he didn't drive anymore. Yeah. So I never had that issue to deal with. For me, I knew this was coming on, and my husband, one of his favorite places is Estes Park. Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And we went for so many summers that we finally did buy a place in Estes Park. Now, he could no longer climb stairs. So the place that we had, to access it, you had to climb stairs. So I had to make all of the arrangements to sell that, get a realtor to find a place that was all on one floor and that would accommodate him. I did think that we would have many more trips up there. But as it turns out, we only got one more trip to the new place that had no stairs to access, which was really nice. And we spent a Christmas there. It was Christmas of 2023. And he really enjoyed that. So we make these preparations, we do these things, we know that it's going to be the last time, and we just enjoy and learn how to live in the moment.
That is, you hit the nail
And
on the head.
that's
Live
what-
in the moment, make some memories.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I did. I had 2 cars that were in both of our names, and I needed a car that would accommodate him a little bit better. So I sold both of those cars, and while he's still very lucid, but at any rate, got all of that done. Bought a new car that can accommodate him, or it could. He has since declined a little bit more, but I got that put in my name so that I don't have anything to worry about when the time comes. So that's how I found the balance, just taking care of those affairs, doing things that I knew would be one more time. I did take my husband out to eat to our favorite Mexican food restaurant on Sunday nights until I couldn't do that anymore. It's just learning how to live in the moment and enjoy what you can't, do what you can, but accept the fact that that further limitations are coming, and that's okay. You have to go with the flow.
Great. You want to?
I have a story I have to share.
Please.
Yes, I do. So Terry and I, when we first met, we went to dinner, and then he looked at me and said, "Do you like to dance?" And I said, "Do I like to dance? I love to dance." My mother used to work for Arthur Murray, and she was an exhibition dancer at the Copacabana in New York.
Oh, wow.
South American dancing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went dancing, and we danced and danced through our marriage. And when we would go to weddings or to think we dance, we were always the first ones on the floor. So we go to this first wedding of 3 or 4 that summer. I have a big family. And we're sitting at the table at the reception, and then the music starts. A couple people get up to dance, but you know how it is in the very beginning. And my husband's sitting in his wheelchair, and I looked at him and I said, "Remember, we used to be the first 2 up there on that dance floor." He said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "You know, we could do that." And he said, "Sure, we could do that." I said, "Okay, let's go." So I just unlocked, and my family's looking at me like, "Where are you going?" Rolled him right up on that dance floor, pushed him out, and then grabbed his hand, and we danced.
I love it.
It was amazing.
Thank you for sharing that.
And we did it, and we
story.
did it, and everybody got up and danced then. And we did that 2 or 3 times. There were 2 or 3 weddings that year. And he danced with each of the brides at each of those
Wow.
weddings.
Of course, this goes to both of you. How has caregiving reshaped your understanding of grief, particularly in grieving losses while still providing love and support? That reminds me of the day you and I met, and the day you and I met after she and I met. So, yeah.
I understand grief at a much different level than I've ever understood it before. We typically think of grieving as something that happens when you've actually lost the loved one. They're no longer here. It's final. It's done. But that's not the case with grief in these kinds of situations. In this kind of situation, you realize you had a life. You were navigating that life together. You still had your dreams. You still had your goals. You wanted to grow old together. And what you realize is the disease is taking this person gradually. And it is limiting them gradually, although with the case of PSP, in a much more progressive way. And so you find yourself going through these moods. You find yourself, or at least I did, speaking for myself, having bouts of depression, having bouts of anxiety, and you don't really understand where it's coming from. Now, in my case, I decided I needed some counseling. And I've had a counselor that has truly helped me to understand that this is grieving right now. It's grieving for things that aren't happening. It's grieving for things that were taken away. It's grieving for expectations that were never met. And it's also, for me, in addition to that, learning how to live in the moment, to just enjoy what we can, to appreciate what we can. And for me, that's how it's changed me and my understanding of grief.
Very well.
That was beautiful.
Oh, very well said. Thank you. Anticipatory grief, that's what we call it at
Mhm.
PSP. And it exists. And like you, I didn't realize that I was having grief, any kind of grief. I thought I was, and I would never give in to the fact that, oh, this is horrible. I would never give in to that because I was afraid if I gave in to that, then I couldn't do what I had to do to maintain and keep going. Until somebody came to me and said, you need counseling. I said, I'm fine. I'm fine. Nothing. What do you mean? You need, and it was my husband's counselor that told me that because he went into counseling because they do suffer from depression. And they end up going on medication for that depression. It's part of the brain, the problem with the tau misfolding. So I think, and I did go into counseling, and about 2 months before Terry died, the counselor said to me, so what do you think you will do when Terry's gone? Well, I fell apart. I can't do that. I can't think about that. If I think about that, I can't continue doing what I'm doing. I have to be positive. You can be positive, but you need to start thinking. Don't answer it. Go home and we'll address it next week. And we did. And
I love that both of you use your resources and you don't go at it alone. I think that's such an important takeaway. Yeah. Don't go at it alone.
Yeah.
I would like to add, sure. I am aware of the fact that there is a finality coming to this, right. And that grief will be different. But I am not planning ahead for it. I don't know what it looks like, and I'm learning to take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
After many, many years of caregiving for someone, and this is for all the caregivers out there, and AARP has written a lot on this, the grieving process, I think, is equal to or first to recovering yourself from the disease. It's almost like you had the disease.
Well, you immerse yourself.
Exactly.
In the entire experience.
24/7.
Yeah. What advice would you give caregivers about advocating for your loved one and sustaining their own well-being while managing the relentless progression of PSP?
The first thing that I would advise a caregiver is you've got to really be in touch with yourself and what is going on with you. And that might sound selfish, but here's the thing. If you aren't taking care of yourself and you are well aware of what is going on with you, it is just almost impossible to give effective care to the loved one. All right? So that's my first advice. I mean, we're strong people, and this disease requires an awful lot of us, but you've got to be in tune with yourself, and that is not selfish at all. I had to kind of overcome that. But here's the thing. I knew that this disease was really creeping up on us pretty fast. And I also knew that physically I was getting to a point where I could not manage it. I was starting to experience muscle aches and pains, pulling my back. I did actually go for an MRI, and it showed that, yes, you cannot be lifting anymore. So at that point, when I knew that this was beyond my capability, I called you, found out about you, called you, and you understood my situation.
You at that time were thinking you were going to move into Manchester care homes right away.
Yes.
We didn't have availability.
You did not have availability, but you did have caregivers that could come to the home. We could schedule them, and I knew that that's what I needed. I needed that relief. I needed that break. And so we scheduled that, and I believe we had 8-hour days 3 times a week. And that's how we did it until we could... you had an opening for my husband.
I recall the day I met you and your husband and Heidi, the dog.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, Heidi's a barker.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And so that's when I learned about PSP. And soon thereafter, you guys moved in, Lachlan moved in. I called you to say, I need to know more about this.
Mhm.
That's how this happened.
Exactly.
I do want to say, when you talk about advocating for your loved one, you really do have to understand what their needs are going to be. And you've got to make sure that the alternative care can provide that for them. This is an adjustment for them. I mean, that's one of the things I was very concerned about, the adjustment that my husband is going to have to make, because it was his dream and it was his vision that he was going to stay in this house until
For the duration. Right.
And so it was an adjustment for him. And you have to make sure that you're listening, that you're in tune, and it is an adjustment process. And that's understandable. And I think that when you're in a really good facility, the caregivers understand that. And everybody is adjusting, and everybody is making the accommodations, and it eventually, the loved one does eventually adjust. And then they don't want to be anywhere else.
Right. You acclimate and realize we're in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's our job, to learn and to educate ourselves on this disease so we can care for them properly.
Right.
And that's when the staff start to connect.
Yep.
And it all falls into place.
And through the support groups, many caregivers will take their loved one to a facility for the same reasons that you've indicated. And then they're calling me upset because I walked in and he's sitting in the chair and he's, all messy. And I said, you're going to have to hire a caregiver because they cannot provide the ratio. Caregiver to patient is one caregiver to 15 patients. That's the number one question you need to ask when you go to a facility. And this person I had spoken to had gone ahead and made that change while I was on vacation. And when I returned and she told me that where he was, I was like, okay, it's just a matter of time. But you're so right. You get to advocate for your loved one. If you're going to go to a facility, you have to understand that you have to know what the ratio is, caregiver to patient. And more importantly, if you can find a care home, it's much better because your ratio's lower and it's more like a home and not like a big facility. And if you go to the facility and you want to do that, and it's a nice facility, then you're still going to have to hire a caregiver because these patients require one-on-one care.
Yeah.
24/7.
You make a great point. It's about the care.
It is.
And some residents need more care than others. And in a large facility with 15-to-1 ratio, you're not going to get the one-on-one, or like for our care home is 4-to-1, but also the connection. It's the same staff. Yeah. And they, like I said a minute ago, they bond and they get to know each other, where it's almost like the staff are intuitive. They know exactly what his care needs are before he even
It's not just the care, it's engaging their brain. They're not dementiaed. These patients know exactly what's going on. They might have cognitive issues. Understandably, that's part of the progression. But if you don't engage the patient, they're just going to be turned into a vegetable.
I'm glad you said that, and it's so important to recognize with PSP. It's very much like ALS,
yes,
and that your body might be broken, but your mind isn't.
Absolutely.
And this gentleman, your husband, is the smartest man I've ever. Constitutional law professor for 45 years, and I walk in his room the other day, and he's in the middle of writing a book. Of course, I requested a chapter on myself, but I don't think that went over. But the mind is still so sharp.
Yeah.
Well, that's another part of the advocating and care that we give the PSP patients, because in my case, I made sure that I could move a bookcase in with my husband's books.
Yeah. And
we are exchanging those books out. And of course, PSP will eventually affect the vision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a recent onset. But thank goodness for Audible and these books on tape and that sort of thing. And now we have entire libraries. I learned about a library system the other day. All I've got to do is go and get a public library card. But I can get him any book that he wants.
And he will listen to all of
And
them.
he will listen to all of them. And then he's also into baseball cards. And so I've brought over cards that he can sort through and go through. So he is he's always been a very studious academia type person, and I just make sure that he's surrounded by the things that he loves, and he
The advocate right here. I'm telling you,
working his mind.
you're an incredible spouse.
Wow.
I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here in the studio. You are an incredible spouse, and what you do for him, you are an advocate, and it's an honor to care for him and to know you. So, thank you.
Likewise, to know you.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, Ileen, what haven't I asked you that I should?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that relate to the patient and the diagnosis, and some research types of things and drug trials. First of all, a patient usually will do anything to try and find a cure. Richard Rainwater, who was a big oil person in Fort Worth, he is a big contributor. Of course, he has passed from PSP. He is still a big contributor to research for PSP. But what we're looking to find the biomarker. A biomarker is so crucial to the diagnosis. If you can truly say that this person has PSP, then you have a better understanding of what that journey is going to be. Not to mention, now you have someone who could be in a drug trial. I've never met a patient that did not want to be a part of a drug trial. And there is one that's going on pretty soon, before the end of the year. Go to curepsp.org. Look at the PSP drug trial. It's nationwide. It's very, very crucial. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And quickly, I would like to say one more thing. Advocacy. Advocate for your patient. Advocate for the disease. I would never allow someone to walk in my house and treat my husband, or walk into a facility, a medical facility, or go to a clinic or even a doctor's office and have anyone deal with my husband that I would ask them, oh, by the way, he has PSP. Do you know what that is? No, I've never heard of it. Well, before you address my husband, we'll talk about what it is. And I did that to everyone, physical therapists, and anyone that came in contact with him.
Janice, what haven't I asked you that I should?
I think you've covered this pretty well. I will add that I do go and visit my husband most weeks, once every day.
You're there often, and we love seeing you for sure.
Thank you. And that's the other thing too, to anybody who's a caregiving spouse. Make sure that you're always welcome at the facility where your spouse is. And I'm able to bring our dog over, and I'm able to bring a meal over occasionally. Not that the meals there aren't good, but my husband did like my cooking for whatever reason. Right. Go figure. But it's just it's a chance to have that connection. We're still married. He has to live there, and I have to live but we are still very much connected. We are of one heart.
Yeah.
And so we're just having to live a little bit differently.
It evolves, but it's still there.
But it's still there. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing. We're going to move on to the nugget portion of this episode. I saw this on the interwebs recently. Doctors treat cancer, but best friends heal the soul. And oftentimes we hear of friends disappearing, and secondary and tertiary acquaintances come to their bedside. So don't neglect your friends and family. On to the lightning round of this episode. Take a deep breath. This is an opportunity for people to get to know both of you on a personal basis. I'm going to start with Ileen, and then we're going to go in rotation. Okay. Where were you born and raised?
Washington, D.C.
Columbia, Missouri. Raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, Woodridge, Illinois, and then in Dallas, Texas.
All over. College and degree?
Did not go to college. Went to work for the Department of Defense in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
All right. A bachelor's in home economics from the University of Texas at Austin, a master's degree in communications management from the University of North Texas, and a law degree from Texas Tech. And I'm working on a PhD in leadership studies right now.
Such an underachiever. Next question. Do you play an instrument?
No.
Do you play an instrument?
A tenor saxophone.
Still in touch with childhood friends?
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
Spicy food or plain Jane?
Some little spicy, not as much as Texas spicy.
Spicy, double spicy.
Oh, wow. Call or text?
Call.
Text.
Okay. Dream job as a
A
child?
social worker.
Dream job as a child?
Being an attorney.
Nice. Can you change a tire?
No.
Yes.
iPhone or Android?
Android.
iPhone.
Are you sentimental?
Very.
Very.
Karaoke, yes or no?
So-so.
Love it.
First live concert?
Sonny and Cher.
I think it was Barry Manilow.
Last question. Do you believe in aliens?
Yes.
Do you believe in aliens?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I do.
That's okay. Thank you both for being here and sharing with your stories with us today. Thanks for making me cry. I don't mind. It's very touching, and I appreciate your candor. If you want to see this episode again or any other past episodes, you can dial us up on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the ManchesterLivingPodcast.com. Thank you for watching today. If you want more information about the PSP Association, we'll put up the URL on the screen. And may your husband, memory, may he rest in peace. And thank you for sharing Lachlan with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for allowing me
much.
to.
That's
And
great.
for allowing us this opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you.